Hi, I'm Mary.
And I'm Katie, and this is The Housewife Did It.
True Crime Edition.
Your voice sounds much better than it did Tuesday. And for us, that's an hour ago.
Does it really?
Yeah. You didn't say,
Okay.
hi!
Hi. I don't have any real-time true crime, which is probably to the benefit of our listeners.
Mm.
So that I can just get on with it.
Yeah.
But I do want to start with a content warning for sexual assault and some mentions of suicidal ideation. But other than that, I'm going to get started.
Okay.
I will also do want to point out there is more mutilation in these two cases than I've covered before. But I'm going to try to be, very factual about it.
Okay.
Okay. So today I am going to give you two stories, both of which are very lightly reported on, but both of which are some of the earliest cases of criminal profiling in the United States. Each of these cases is briefly featured in John Douglas's book Mindhunter, and the first one I'm going to tell you about is an inspiration for a portion of the Netflix series. So we'll start with the case of Betty Jean Shade and how John Douglas himself and his behavioral science unit used criminal profiling to find her killer. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So Betty Jean Shade was born on Christmas Day in 1957
Cute.
to her two very loving parents. She was known for having a kind heart and a love for animals, and some of her favorite things to do were crochet and take care of her hair.
Okay, cute.
Hair care and maintenance.
Yeah.
This is the extent of what I could find about Betty Jean as a person.
Mm.
Yeah, that's
I
all I
bet.
got.
I bet she's got
There is
cooler things.
there is one picture of her online.
Betty.
So, I think one silver lining, I guess, is that in telling you what happened to her, we learn a little more about her.
Okay.
But that's the only, standalone things I could find. On May 29th, 1979, 22-year-old Betty Jean Shade was walking home after babysitting at 10:15 p.m. in the Logan Township of Pennsylvania when she disappeared. 4 days later, a local man was out on a nature walk on, I'm going to do my best, Wapsanonet
Sounds
Mountain. Wapson. It's so many O's.
great.
Near Altoona when he came across something that looked like a mannequin in an illegal dump site on Skyline Drive. Now, I think we've all heard it's never a mannequin.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, to be fair, it is an illegal dump site.
Yeah.
So, people throw shit away.
Yeah.
It could be a mannequin. He called the Logan Township police and met two officers at the Buckhorn Inn down the road. He led them to the trail where he had been walking, where he showed them Betty Jean's body, discarded in a pile of trash. Her body had been well preserved during the days she had been unaccounted for, but the mutilation caused her to be unrecognizable. Betty Jean was found in what was described as a frog-like position, with her legs spread apart and her knees bent upward. She had been sexually assaulted. Her jaw was fractured. She had two black eyes. And her blonde hair had been cut off and was hanging from a tree in the area.
Interesting.
I will say, I don't know. It was very long. I don't know if it was just cut at the nape of her neck and then the hair was hung. I don't really know.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, I'm
Yes.
like
Um,
picturing like the end scene in Rapunzel
yeah.
where like I'm thinking like does she still have like a bob?
Right. Like
Like
that's what I'm saying. I don't know, like, not to be graphic, but I don't know if it was like she was scalped
yeah,
or like it was just her hair
just
and
cut.
her hair was so long that it could be draped over a tree branch. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, the cause of death was determined to be a blow to the head, but Chief John Reeder found multiple postmortem stab wounds and noted that both of her breasts had been cut off and a cut had been made to her genitals. Um, I do know exactly what that cut was. I don't feel the need to say it. If you want me to, I can.
Well, I have like thoughts about the whole thing. So
Mhm.
I would think that if she died by blow to the head, then we would
Mhm.
know if she had been scalped, like that would have been like a part
That's
of
true.
that report. But
Yeah.
then as soon as you started saying that like her breasts were removed,
Right.
it also doesn't seem like the MO of that person would have any qualms about scalping her. So it like
Yeah.
almost feels like if you're going to go to the extreme of like genital mutilation and like removing her breasts, why would you just cut her hair at like a nice regular it's like hard
Yeah.
because my instinct is like no, if she was scalped surely we would know, but then it sounds like this is so brutal that like
Yeah.
that's well within the possibility.
Yeah, and I will get into like the theory on her hair specifically,
Okay.
but in my opinion, I think all three of those things are very like directed toward hating women.
Mm-hmm.
Like cutting off the long hair, cutting off her breasts, and then like again, like not to be super graphic, but like the way that they cut her genitals is like something that happens in childbirth,
Okay.
is what I'll say.
Yeah.
Um, and so like it feels very like pointed towards like the things that make her most feminine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that would make sense
Um,
why maybe she wasn't scalped because that's like a torture thing. Maybe her hair was just
yeah,
taken because that makes her less feminine. So it's like, oh
right.
look, now she's got short hair, you know.
Yeah. So again, Betty Jean's body had been well preserved, which led investigators to believe that she couldn't have been out there for the entire duration of the days she had been missing. However, her stomach contents suggested that she had been killed shortly after she had disappeared.
Okay.
So they believe that she was like killed and then held somewhere, like her body was
Oh,
before they
okay.
brought her outside.
Is that like
I
they know what she ate right before she went missing? Is that how they know that?
I guess so.
Okay.
Well, she was like babysitting, so I think that like it would be pretty easy to figure out what she ate.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, Probably like
Fruit
here's
snacks.
$10 worth of pizza.
Yeah.
Another reason they believed this to be true was that police in the area had been frequently checking that dump site where she had been found because they had gotten several complaints of residents dumping trash there illegally. So they felt like with how often they were checking there, they would have found her if she had been there before.
Yeah.
Chief Reeder quickly called John Douglas of the FBI's Behavioral Science Unit for help in figuring out exactly who they were looking for, and he came up with the following profile of their killer. He would be a white male, 17 to 25 years old, or older if he had a slow social development or was physically isolated. He would be thin, a loner who was not overly smart during high school, introverted, interested in pornography, have a dysfunctional broken childhood with an absent father and an overprotective mother. He would be fearful of women. He would be either unemployed or working a blue collar job, likely working during the day and engaging in social activities at night. Um, he would visit the cemetery or go to the funeral of Betty Jean, and he most likely lived between Betty Jean's house and the house where she was babysitting the night she went missing.
Okay.
In addition to the creation of the profile, the investigators concluded that the killer likely knew Betty Jean based on the mutilation of her face, breasts, and genitals.
Do they believe
They believe
he
that
had killed other people?
no,
Okay.
I don't think so. They think that this was like someone who was like had like a personal issue with her.
Okay.
They believe that this was a way for the killer to depersonalize Betty Jean if he did have a relationship with her. They also believe that the removal of her hair was a sign of rage, since she was known to be very neat and particular about her hair. So
Mm.
cutting it off would have been like an insult or an attempt to embarrass her.
Yeah.
At this point in the investigation, the police had two suspects they were considering. One was the man who had discovered Betty Jean's body, Patrick Dougherty. The police were leaning toward Patrick for a few different reasons. Mainly, his story wasn't adding up. They didn't believe he was out on a nature walk like he had claimed,
Because that's stupid.
for the following reasons. One, he found her at an illegal garbage dump site, which seems like a weird place for a nature walk.
Yeah, not exactly nature.
Um, he was out of work at the time on disability. He had been seen urinating in the location where he found her body, and they felt he wasn't dressed for a lengthy walk.
Okay.
Finally, they noted that he was completely dry when they arrived or when they met up with him, despite the fact that it had been raining that morning leading up to them meeting with him. So, like, if he had been on this lengthy nature walk,
Mm-hmm.
he would be wet.
Mm-hmm. Now remind me, like,
Um,
did he call the police, like, from there?
he, so this is the 70s.
Oh, right.
So, no.
Mm.
He walked down to an inn and
Okay.
called them from there.
So wouldn't he have had to be wet anyway? Like, even if he wasn't on a lengthy nature walk, to even
Well,
have found her,
what
wouldn't
they're
he?
thinking is that he was not up there and found her.
Like, never. Never.
Maybe he put her there,
Yeah.
and then one day he drove to this inn and decided to call them.
Okay.
In addition to this, they found that he lived within 4 blocks of Betty Jean's house, and they found out that he had actually hit on her several times unsuccessfully.
Uh-oh. And I'm guessing when he
In his
found her
interviews with
body,
police,
he wasn't like, oop, that's that girl I used to hit on all the time.
he, no, I don't think so. In his interviews with police, he admitted that he considered not reporting finding the body at all because he thought he would become a suspect.
Mm.
Throughout the interview, he was visibly nervous and unable to provide a solid alibi, stating that he had been watching television with his wife the night that Betty Jean disappeared. John Douglas told the police that he felt that if Patrick was the perpetrator, it's likely that when he reported finding Betty Jean's body, he had gone back to visit the dump site and then was like trying to find a way to implant himself into the investigation as early as possible. Um, he did think that Patrick fit the profile pretty closely in certain areas. He was a drinker and a smoker. He was antisocial. He would have been strong enough to handle the kidnapping, murder, and disposal alone. But he was 30 years old and he was married with children.
Mm.
And according to the profile, that seemed unlikely for the style of the killing. And he had lawyered up very quickly and was refusing to take a polygraph or cooperate.
Okay.
So, They had to look elsewhere.
Mm.
Their other suspect, because remember I said they had two?
Mm-hmm.
Their other suspect was Betty Jean's partner, Charles F. Solt Jr., who went by the nickname Butch. So
Mm.
that's what I'm going to call him from now on. The reason I called him her partner is because he's reported as both her boyfriend and fiance. So I don't know which is more accurate, but I do know that they lived together at the point where she was murdered. However, most people in her life questioned what she saw in him.
Fair.
'Cause apparently he's not a shining star.
Mm-hmm. Or else he probably wouldn't be a suspect.
Um, yeah. The profile they had created seemed to match him almost perfectly. Butch had been raised by a single mother who was noted to be overly involved and domineering in his life. He admitted to police that he had only had two sexual encounters in his life, both with older women, and both ending with those women allegedly mocking him for not being able to perform.
Mm. Okay.
He also stated that although he and Betty Jean were engaged to be married and they were madly in love, she was able to date and have sex with other men,
Hmm.
which again makes me question what their relationship was. Like, does she know that they're engaged?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's the agreement here?
Or like, is
I
that
don't know.
allowed because he has sexual trauma and like doesn't
Right.
want a sexual relationship with her? So he's like, I just want love and affection, so you can go have sex with other people.
All right. I don't know. At her funeral, Butch spoke about their relationship, stating that he wanted to dig up the coffin and climb in it with her.
Okay. It's not as cute as you thought it was, Butch.
Lastly, Butch and his brother Mike both worked as trash haulers,
Ah.
which meant they would have had regular access to where Betty Jean had been dumped.
Mm.
Upon hearing the details about Butch, John Douglas felt that he was a pretty good suspect. He fit the profile pretty well and like better I think than Patrick, but there were still some flaws with him having potentially committed the crime. First, he wasn't much bigger than Betty Jean was herself. So if he had committed the crime, it's likely he wasn't the only one.
Mm.
Secondly, the autopsy found semen inside of Betty Jean, which seemed unlikely given the fact that Butch had previously mentioned that he was inept with women.
Mm-hmm.
Investigators believed that if Butch was the killer, it's likely that he met Betty Jean walking home from her babysitting job, where they got into an argument and he became violent and beat her to death. They even believed it was possible that he had transported her somewhere else and mutilated her, but what they had trouble believing was that he would have been the one to rape her
Mm-hmm.
or that he would have been able to dump the body.
Yeah. But it does seem like he would have like the knowledge of how much she cares about her hair and
Mhm.
perhaps like resentment about that fact. And then he would have obviously like negative feelings toward women's genitalia. So
Mhm.
then obviously this is like hypothetical, you don't have to answer if we're getting there, but like is it possible that he would have like had his brother sexually assault her? And you know what I mean? Like if we're thinking it's with other people and we know him and his brother both have this job. I guess we don't know how close they are or whatever, but
Mhm.
like would he have been like I can't, but I want to torture her or I want to like whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. So are you like leaning more toward him than Patrick?
Mm, I don't really know. Like to me, circumstantially, no, dude. Like Patrick, why the fuck were you there? Why are you acting fucking weird?
I was
Like, but
I was like, this is like a truly me moment. Like I was like writing this and I was like, oh my God, it was Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's obviously Patrick. Like I don't want to write anything else.
Yeah.
because, like, circumstantially, like, it feels, like, so obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I was
But
thinking,
then
like,
I also, like, then I started reading about Butch, and I was like, "Hmm."
yeah. I feel like, I just think, like, I guess I was just, like, waiting, thinking Butch will probably have done some suspicious stuff, too. But it's like, if
Mhm.
Patrick is, like, innocent, but he was interested in her, it could explain, like, why he
Mhm.
wanted to be involved in the case. It could explain, like, weirdness, but it, like, wouldn't explain why when you found her dead, like you would think that if that's the case, if he's into her, like, finding her dead would have been, like, incredibly, like, would have affected him a lot, you know? Like, this is a girl that I
Yeah, but he's
like.
married with children.
Right, but I mean, like,
So, like, how much could he publicly allow it to affect him?
I didn't mean, like, he's
You know?
telling the police, like, I'm heartbroken, but I mean, like, he apparently wasn't even out in the rain when he found her. It's like, you would think this would have actually happened and he would have actually found her and it would have been a surprise and he would have been like, that's that girl. Like, that's that girl that I know
Yeah.
from the neighborhood. And it seems like there's no shock for him, which is, like, why
Yeah.
it seems like it must be him. And it also feels like the boyfriend is, like, easy to be like, it's the boyfriend. Like, he
Yeah.
would know the
I think they're
most.
both
But
equally suspicious.
yeah, I need to know
So,
about Butch's brother.
well, you are in luck because investigators take into consideration the fact that Butch couldn't have done all of this, and they begin looking at his brother Mike as another suspect, specifically, like, in tandem with Butch. Like,
Okay.
not like Mike did it on his own, but like they did it together.
Would Mike be big
He
enough to have
also
done it
fit
on
the
his own?
profile. I think he was bigger than Butch, but I think the idea is that they like I think the police thought like
Why
this
would
was
he?
maybe a
Yeah.
two-man job.
Yeah.
Um, so he obviously also fit the profile because he came from the same childhood background and job as Butch. He also had a history of violence, having been in a mental health facility for behavioral problems and struggles with anger management. Mike was married, but they thought that he could still fit the profile because his wife was pregnant and it had been noted that this was a stressor within their lives. And in fact, on the night of Betty Jean's disappearance, Mike's wife was in the hospital giving birth.
Hmm.
So, could that baby coming have been like a turning point for Mike? Could he have helped his brother and raped Betty Jean in the process? Is that what has happened? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But since the man who had found her body was refusing to work with police, they kind of had to start with Butch and Mike.
Yeah.
They didn't have anyone else to look at. So they turned up the heat on the investigation with them. They gave Butch a polygraph, which he passed. However, they did note that he had inappropriate emotional responses to some of the questions, which is confusing to me because, like, why is that not a failure?
Yeah, I mean, unless they just mean, like, failure. I don't know, because unless they just mean, like, failure on, like, the chart, like a heart rate failure, but, like, I think that
Yeah,
people that conduct whatever polygraphs, polygraphers, whatever they're
right.
called, I think that they're trained to, like, also interpret your body language. So, like, yeah, you would
Right.
think you would take both of those into account.
It was weird. Next, they decided to interview Mike. Their plan with Mike was to keep the interrogation casual, not accusing him, but giving him an understanding that something may have happened and gotten out of hand. They asked him if he had had sex with Betty Jean, and he claimed that he had.
Mm.
They then asked if he had helped dispose of her body. They told him that they did not think he had killed her, but that if he did not cooperate with them, he would be in just as much trouble as the killer.
Mm.
At this time, Mike told the police that Butch had killed Betty Jean, and that he and their sister, Kathy Weisinger, Betty Jean's best friend, had helped him dispose of the body.
Mm.
After the confession, the police recovered one of Betty Jean's breasts and learned that Butch had kept the second one, but never gave any indication of where he had hidden it, and it was never found.
Mm.
Yeah. During the 1981 trial, the following explanation of the night Betty Jean was killed came to light. After Betty Jean had finished babysitting for the night, she was walking home holding knitting supplies and some clothes when Kathy's car approached her on the street with Butch, Mike, and Kathy inside. After they picked her up, it's speculated that Butch reached a breaking point with his frustration at his and Betty Jean's sexual relationship and he killed her. Kathy confirms that Butch was upset because Betty Jean was going to leave him.
Mm.
She said that she and Butch wrestled over a knife, or he overtook her. Butch and Kathy wrestled over the knife, not
Oh.
Butch and Betty Jean.
Okay.
He overtook his sister, and at some point, Kathy says she does believe that Mike raped Betty Jean, which further enraged Butch and led him to the post-mortem mutilation.
Like, Mike just raped her in front of Kathy and Butch, like, in this car?
So I was like a little confused on where all this was happening because I saw different reports. I believe that they were outside at this point
Okay.
when this like wrestling over the knife and stuff is happening, but it's like reported differently everywhere, and so it's really unclear exactly where it's happening.
And you're so enraged that you don't
We're
beat
also
the shit out of your
we're all the only
brother?
person we're hearing this from is from Betty Jean's best friend who let her brothers
Rape and kill
kill her
her.
and didn't tell anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how trustworthy she is anyway.
Yeah. But also
Um,
beat the shit out of Mike for raping your girl. Not what?
yeah,
I'm so
yeah.
confused.
Um, Betty Jean was reported missing the next day after she failed to make it to another babysitting job that morning. It was also revealed at the trial that police actually found Butch and Kathy at the dump site 2 days after Betty Jean had gone missing when they had been there visiting because of the claims of like illegal dumping.
Mm.
And they were like, "What are y'all doing up here?" Because we've heard about illegal dumping. Are you illegally dumping?
Mm-hmm.
You know, doing their job. And the duo claimed that they were searching for Betty Jean.
This was when?
Kathy was like, 2 days after she went missing, which is 2 days before she was found. Kathy's like, "Yeah, my brother's girlfriend is missing. We're just looking around to see if we can find her. Not here."
Weird.
Yeah.
Mm.
Um, Kathy admits that after the murder, Butch talked about wanting to return to the scene of the crime and move the body. And a few days later, they left her on the mountain road where she was found. So yeah, I think that this happened outside somewhere, and they left her there. I'm just really not sure where.
Okay, but he, like, so did all of the mutilation, do we know, take place at the time she was murdered and wherever they left her? Or did they, like, he came back and did that?
So they were able to determine that the mutilation was post-mortem. Based on like Kathy's story, what they think happened is that he killed Betty Jean and then he found out Mike had raped her and he went back
Oh,
and mutilated her body.
interesting.
Yeah.
How? I
Yeah.
don't get how he wouldn't have known.
I really don't
And do
know.
they think Mike raped her post mortem? Like, do they think.
That's the other thing that I can't figure out because like I don't know unless like
Because if they
she
witnessed him
didn't die
commit.
very quickly.
Maybe, but if they witnessed him commit the murder, then I feel like he would have had to witness anything else that was done to her unless he killed her, They all left. Mike returned and assaulted her post-mortem.
Yeah. I really don't know, and, like, I think that's, like, the tough part, and because I was gonna do this case on its own, and
Mm-hmm.
I literally couldn't find anything, and
Yeah.
then the same thing happened with the next case I was gonna do, so I just put them together, and they both, like, were Mindhunter cases, so they kind of, like, fit together
Mm.
that way, but, yeah, it was so hard to find, like, confirmation of those things, and then the only source we have that information from is Kathy.
Right. Yeah.
So, Butch was convicted of first-degree murder, and Mike entered a plea agreement, which resulted in him being sent to another mental health facility. Butch Solt remains in the state correctional institution at Huntington, serving his life sentence.
Good.
And that's it for the story of Betty Jean Shade.
Nothing for Kathy?
No, I believe based on her like testimony and cooperation.
Rude. Betrayal.
You know, they say snitches get stitches, but I tell you what, in the court of law, snitches get
Free.
a lot of good stuff.
Yeah.
So we're gonna go ahead with the second story. Like I said, the only thing like really connecting these two stories is the use of criminal profiling.
Okay.
Um, I do think that there are some similarities in like what happened to these women, but it's not like the same killer or anything. I just want to like clarify that the only reason I put them together is because they were both very short and underreported, and I wanted to tell both of them,
Mm-hmm.
and they were both stories that I originally read about in Mindhunter.
Yeah.
So the second story I have for you today is that of Francine Elveson. Francine Elveson was born on July 21st, 1953, to her parents, Leon and Sylvia. She had a younger sister named Debbie and a younger brother named Joel. Fran, as her family and friends called her,
How
had endured
cute.
several years of physical pain due to a condition she had, which had her undergoing several surgeries to repair her spine so that she could walk and breathe on her own.
Sweet Fran.
I know. Francine had kyphoscoliosis, which is a type of scoliosis that results in a I put this in quotes because it's a lot of like medical jargon. But it says it's a deviation of the normal curvature of the spine in the sagittal and coronal plates and can include a rotation of the spinal axis.
Hmm. Ow.
Yeah. At the time of her murder, Francine was only 4'11" and weighed 80 pounds.
And she's how old?
26.
And that's like because of this
It's due to her
scoliosis?
medical condition. Yeah,
Yeah. That's awful.
yeah. And she was working as a special education teacher at a local daycare center after obtaining her master's degree in education from Fordham University. On October 12, 1979, 26-year-old Francine was leaving the home she shared with her family at the Pelham Parkway House Apartments in the Bronx. She headed out at around 6:30 a.m. to get to work, taking the stairwell instead of the elevator because it had been running slowly. Almost 2 hours later, around 8:20 a.m., a 15-year-old neighbor of Francine's was on his way out to go to school when he discovered Francine's wallet between the third and fourth floors of the complex. He put it in his pocket to hold on to while he was at school, and then he gave it to his father when he came home for lunch. It's a different time. Kids
Mm-hmm.
could leave school and come home for lunch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's crazy. His father took it to the Elvisons' apartment at around 3 p.m. and gave it to Francine's mother. Sylvia then called the daycare where Francine worked to let her know that her wallet had been found. But instead, she was told that Francine had not come to work that day.
Mm. Like,
When she hung up, mhm,
since like she was supposed to be there in the morning, and this is like
yes,
afternoon now. Okay.
this is the end of the day, like the end of the school day. When she hung up with Francine's employer, Sylvia enlisted the help of her daughter Deborah and a neighbor, and they began to search the apartment building top to bottom. When they finally reached the top of the stairwell, they went out of the landing and onto the roof, and this is where they discovered Francine. Francine was laying nude on the roof of the apartment building. She was bound at her wrists and ankles with her own belt and stockings. Her nipples had been cut off and placed on top of her chest.
Why are you gonna cut
Her
them off if you're
underwear
just
had been
gonna put
placed
them back?
her underwear had been placed over her face. Her earrings were on the ground on either side of her head. So like next to her ears.
Hmm.
The killer had written "You can't stop me" on her thigh and "fuck you" on her stomach with a pin, which he then placed along with an umbrella into her vagina.
Place the pin. Oh, okay. I was
Yeah,
like, placed what?
and the umbrella.
Okay. And is it?
Her comb,
I'll wait.
her comb was placed in her pubic hair, and the killer had defecated nearby and then covered it with Francine's clothing.
Does he realize that's a bad idea?
In the in the
70s?
70s.
No.
During the autopsy, it was discovered that Francine had been severely beaten with a blunt object to the degree that her jaw, nose, and cheekbones were fractured, and her teeth had come loose from her gums.
Mm.
They also noted that she had several bite marks on her legs and shallow lacerations across her body. However, the cause of death was ultimately determined to be a ligature strangulation caused by the strap of her purse.
Jesus.
Sylvia explained to police that she noticed Francine was missing some money, a ruby birthstone ring, a costume jewelry ring with a greenish blue stone, a Belova watch with a red face and band, and a necklace with a gold pendant in the shape of the Hebrew letter Hi. They asked her to describe the letter to them, the police did, so that they could be on the lookout. And once she did, they realized that Francine's body had actually been contorted to match the symbol.
Wow. But the necklace was
Yeah.
taken?
Yes.
Okay.
Traces of semen were found on Francine's body, but they were able to determine she had not been raped. They also
I
noted
mean,
that she had no defensive wounds.
she had been raped by.
Yeah.
Come on now, guys.
Yeah. She had no defensive wounds and nothing of use under her fingernails. The only piece of evidence they found at the scene that was testable in 1979 was a single hair found on Francine during her autopsy. However, forensic hair analysis is often considered shaky evidence. Essentially, what they could tell from the hair they found was that it belonged to an African American person, and to utilize it, they would have to compare it under a microscope with the hair of any suspect they were considering. So until they had a suspect in mind, they really couldn't use it. They just had to hold on to it.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question.
Mhm.
Is it thought that, like, she dropped the wallet, maybe, like, as she was being attacked or something? Or is it thought that, like, her killer took the wallet and then dropped it on the way down the stairs? Like, that wallet is what led them to even, like, start looking for her. Why was it just on, like, in between floors?
I believe that Um, and I'm not gonna like give anything away. I know what happened. I believe that there was like a struggle
Okay.
on the stairwell,
Okay.
and in that struggle, things probably fell out of her purse.
Okay. And also, like,
I think that's what happened.
I get that a roof is like kind of remote, I guess. But like that's a lot to take place. Like a
Yeah.
lot of things that this killer did to her, like a long series of events to do in the daylight on what I assume is not like a high-rise roof. Or maybe it
Yeah.
is. But like and apparently there is roof access, so like people could have just come out there. Like it seems a
Yeah.
little risky.
I think that the person who did this was very reckless in general.
Okay.
So, after Francine's murder, male residents of the apartment complex had tried taking matters into their own hands to protect the women who lived there.
Cute.
They had been seen taking turns as lookouts in the halls, walkways, and stairwells, carrying knives and other weapons. The women, however, weren't defenseless. They were seen moving in groups, carrying mace and ball peen hammers.
Nice.
Residents admitted that they didn't know exactly what they were looking for in the perpetrator, but they were on high alert for anyone acting out of turn or messing with the women who lived in the building. They were also fighting for security to be tightened up at the complex. I love these people.
Mm-hmm.
With public pressure building, the police created a task force of 26 detectives who ended up questioning more than 2,000 potential witnesses and suspects, including all known sex offenders in the New York City metropolitan area. After a month of investigating and not having any strong leads, New York Housing Authority Detective Tom Foley and Lieutenant Joe D'Amico contacted John Douglas and the Behavioral Science Unit in Quantico, and they came up with the following profile. The killer would be an average-looking white male, 25 to 35 years old, would appear disheveled, would be unemployed and mainly nocturnal, living within half a mile of the building with his parents or an older female relative. He would be single with no close friends, a high school or college dropout with no military experience, low self-esteem, would not own a car or have a driver's license, at some point was in a mental health facility and would be taking prescription medication, would have attempted suicide by strangulation or asphyxia, did not use drugs or alcohol, would have a large collection of bondage and S&M porn. This would be his first crime, and they believed it was likely someone they had already spoken to, someone who would have been cooperative and would try to inject himself into the investigation.
Okay.
Do I know how they come up with these things? No.
Well, why
They're
are.
always right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, who am I to question the experts? But I have some issues. First of all, so is that hair that we found that belongs to an African American person? It just like doesn't matter to us anymore?
So police like were really like focused on that hair. I think because it was the only thing they could
Right.
utilize. But when the profilers came in, they explained to them that in their experience so far, that crimes like this don't normally cross racial lines.
Yeah.
Usually the perpetrator and the victim are of the same race, and so they believed that, like, based on what had happened to her, that it was very unlikely that a black man had done this,
Mm-hmm.
and that the hair maybe was just misplaced.
Okay.
Like, that they don't know how it got there, but that, like, they didn't think it was the killer's hair.
Yeah. I do think it's very interesting that they think. I get why they would think this person has probably been institutionalized at some point, takes prescription medication for mental health issues or mental illness. It's a little interesting to me that they think specifically they would have attempted suicide by strangulation. But then that they said that he would not use drugs or alcohol.
I know.
Like, it's very interesting to me that those would all be true, but whatever, I'll let the experts do their thing.
Yeah. After receiving the profile from the FBI, police began to comb through their suspect and interview list, taking out anyone who was married, had children, was a known sex offender, or for any other reason didn't fit the profile. They started with over 2,000 people on their list. They managed to narrow it down to 22 men.
Nice.
And one stood out as a near perfect match.
Okay.
Carmine Calabro, I don't know.
That's great.
Was a 30-year-old white unemployed actor who lived with his father in Francine's building on the same floor as her family. He had never been married or really had a successful relationship with a woman. He was a high school dropout and had no military experience. Police found an extensive collection of bondage porn in his home, and they were able to find out that he had attempted suicide by both hanging and asphyxia, both before and after Francine's murder.
Wow.
The police had interviewed his father early in the investigation, since he lived on the same floor.
Yeah.
They were interviewing all of the tenants of the building, and he told them that Carmine was in a mental health facility receiving treatment for depression, so they quickly ruled him out. He wasn't there? Okay. However, with that profile, now they were like, okay, wait, maybe it was him. So they interviewed employees at the institution and learned that security had allowed Carmine to walk out of the institution the night before Francine was killed.
Great.
Just over a year after Francine's murder, Carmine Calabro was arrested, and police took an impression of his teeth. They conferred with 3 forensic dentists and confirmed that his teeth were a perfect match for the bite marks found on Francine's legs. Still, Carmine pleaded not guilty at his trial, but was convicted of murder and sentenced to 25 years to life. The police worked out the following account of what happened to Francine. Carmine accosted her on the 4th floor landing of the stairwell and then forced her up to the 6th floor, where he stripped her and sexually assaulted her. Once he had her at the top of the building, so I'm guessing it was a 6th floor building.
Okay.
Once he had her at the top of the building, he mutilated her and strangled her before writing on her body with a pen. This likely happened around 7:15 a.m. Police also believed that while this was Carmine's first crime, if he had not been found guilty, they don't think it would have been his last.
Yeah. And did he basically just return to his facility? Do we know the timeline?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I don't even think his dad knew he had
come
out. Yeah.
Was he there for
In
this
April?
purpose, it seemed? Or he just ran into her, started yelling at her, and it happened?
I think I hate to put it like this, but I think he saw an 80-pound, 4'11" woman.
Yeah.
And was like, I could take her.
Yeah. I just wonder, so was...
I think that, it was, a crime of opportunity, and I think, they said, he had never really had a relationship with a woman.
Yeah.
And so I think finding a woman who was, someone that he viewed as easily able to overpower, I think he just, did it.
Yeah. It just seems so wild that if she had not been there, he would have probably just, gone home, and his dad would know he came home. But, then he did not.
I know. In April of 1983, the Behavioral Science Unit was featured in an article in Psychology Today where Lieutenant D'Amico discussed the profiling program's impact on Francine's case without mentioning her name or Carmine's. He was just like saying like there was a case we had and they like helped us with it. He was quoted in the article as saying, "They had him so right that I asked the FBI why they hadn't given us his phone number too."
Mm.
After the article was published and Carmine had figured out that Lieutenant D'Amico's comment was about him, he wrote a letter to John Douglas and his unit where he continued to insist on his innocence while also complimenting the police and FBI agents on their profiling skills. Then he reminded them of the hair found on Francine's body and assured them that this evidence would clear him. But what he didn't know was that police had already figured out that the hair was irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
They had learned that Francine had been placed in a body bag after it had been used to transport an African American man, had not been cleaned,
Oh.
and they were able to match that hair to that man.
So, like, on her way to the autopsy, she got this hair.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is why we collect evidence before we do that, my friends.
Mm-hmm. After receiving the letter, the FBI responded and asked Carmine to be interviewed for their profiling program and eventually be featured in the Mindhunter book. He agreed, and in July of 1983, Bill Hagmeyer and Roseanne Russo went to Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, New York, to meet with him. Again, he reasserted his innocence. They remarked that he was nervous, polite, cooperative, and eager about his upcoming appeal. He claimed that he was wrongfully convicted and that the bite mark evidence they used against him was bogus. In fact, he had all of his teeth removed so that they wouldn't be able to use them against him again in the event that his appeal worked.
Okay, Ted Bundy. Not that Ted Bundy did that, but...
Because do you know what doesn't exist is dental x-rays.
Mm-hmm.
The teeth were in your mouth at one point.
Yeah. They already did.
Just because they're not there now doesn't mean they weren't.
Also, like, what makes him think they were gonna do it again? They've already done it. They don't need to waste their resources doing it again.
They also noted that he had not made any friends in prison and that when the interview was over, he made it very clear that he did not want them to leave because nobody else talked to him there.
That's brutal.
Why would they?
Yeah.
Why would people want to be your friend, dude?
Yeah. But poor... He seems so ill.
Yeah. Like, the teeth, like, thing, like, that I think that's when I was like, okay, if you genuinely believe that pulling all of your teeth out after they've been, like, x-rayed and cast and molded and used against you, like, that you think, like, if they're gone from your head that they don't matter anymore, like...
Do we know what he was in? I mean, I not that I have, like, a great trust in diagnostics in the 70s for mental health, but do we know what he was in a facility for? Like, this does not...
Depression.
Okay. I'm thinking...
That was it.
I'm thinking there's more than that, friends.
Yeah, but, like, was depression in the 70s
Right.
the same as depression now?
Right.
Or was depression in the 70s like what they used to call, like, when women had, like...
Hysteria.
What did they call it? Like, yeah, hysteria.
Mm-hmm.
Like, depression is the blanket statement for mental illness.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Each of these crimes is horrific and clearly the work of monsters. Men who couldn't control themselves enough to leave these two women alone in the first place, but then took it a step farther with such detailed mutilation. These details, though, are ultimately what led to their downfall. The more they added their own, like, personal touches to the murders, the more the FBI was able to figure out exactly who they were to a T without even meeting them. The Behavioral Science Unit of the Federal Bureau of Investigation was founded in 1972 in response to a rise in repeated offenders of rape and what was at the time called serial murderers.
Mm-hmm.
They created a new program within the training division in Quantico and proved that their skills in profiling were extremely valuable, and it is a skill that is still heavily used today by law enforcement agencies. I just think it's so hard giving you the details of the mutilation, but it is I guess I don't know, the fact that that's what
Right.
pinned them
Yeah.
is bonkers to me.
Yeah.
You could literally they could not control themselves,
Mm-hmm.
and he wrote "You can't stop me" on her
Right.
leg,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they took it so far that that's how they were found.
Yeah,
Is
and
crazy to me.
I think with each little detail you add, it's like, okay, so we're looking for a type of person that would insert an object into someone. Okay, we're
Yeah.
looking for a type of person that would remove female specific organs. We're looking it's each of those details
Yeah.
makes it a little easier to figure something out. Okay, they don't have a good relationship with women, and obviously it goes deeper because then they're it's the mother, they're not married, and it is interesting how they
Yeah.
come up with all that. But it's if you would just kill somebody casually, without
And
all
be
the
chill about it.
and just calm down everybody,
We
then
don't need the frill.
all they would be able to say is this is the type of person that shoots someone, and that would be a lot of people.
Right. I was thinking, I think what really stands out to me, and what I think maybe is what helped them pinpoint Francine's killer so exactly, was the defecation, because it made me think of in psychology classes we all take in college. Like in ours, they did talk about the psychology behind kids at your school who used to poop and smear it on the walls.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that that specifically
Mm-hmm.
is so telling.
Yeah.
And then with Betty Jean's case, I think the fact that her breasts were removed and taken was also very, I don't know, it just, I don't get it. I couldn't do it. I would not be
Yeah.
able to put all of these facts together, but I do see how they're so specific
Yeah.
and so abnormal, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
that they kind of show you who the person is.
Yeah, it would take a very specific person to do those things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fair warning, next week my case also includes mutilation, or I guess it doesn't. Just, it's graphic, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
The most.
Yeah. All right. Anything else, Mary?
No. If you stayed this long, thank you.
Yeah.
Make sure to always take your allergy medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And your Flonase.
Mm-hmm.
And to take care of your throat.
Mm-hmm.
And don't swallow your mucus.
Yeah.
It's not good for you.
Yeah.
That's everything I have.
Also, make sure to download, reply to, and overall interact with our episodes.
I guess.
Yeah.
Tell us about a time when you lost your voice.
Yes, please. That's the prompt. All right. Bye.
Bye.